Yeah, yeah, it's all about the looks.
It's called Don't Show Weakness.
All right. Hey, we'd like to welcome everyone here to our council chambers and those who are watching in TV land. I've asked Kent Clark to give us an invocation. That'd be you.
Our Father in heaven, as we offer prayer at this time, grateful for the blessings in each of our lives, grateful for this free country we live in. We're grateful for our community which we have, grateful for the city council and the mayor for their time and effort to plan and to organize our efforts. We pray for them this night that they might be guided in their decisions. Bless us as a community. We might be kind and loving with each other and watch over us this day. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. I've asked Councilman Scopes to lead us in the pledge.
Items, please rise.
Join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, is there anyone in the public that would like to address the mayor and council? If you're here for our public hearings, I would encourage you to wait for that time. But if you'd just like to address us, anyone that'd like to come up and can do that. Seeing none, I'll go to our council comments. Councilmember Mendenhall.
Thank you, Mayor. Had a couple meetings this week with different boards. Number one was with the airport board. I had a great meeting talking about the goings on for a month down at the airport. Also detailing some plans of expansion down at the airport. If you haven't been down there in a while, you should check it out. If you find Chris Child in the right mood, he'll even take you up in an airplane and try to make you sick and look over the airport. But it's great to see the expansion, the growth, the excitement that we have out at our airport, and the many tenants that lease the property and their love and care for the airport. It's a great board to be on. Look forward to the expansion. Other meeting I attended yesterday was with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Had an opportunity to sit with the editorial boards of the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune to discuss issues affecting all 248 cities and towns in the state of Utah, which are members of the League of Cities and Towns, and really talk in detail about our city, about Spanish Fork. Obviously, when you're in downtown Salt Lake, and talking about cities, the discussion can quickly get to larger cities, and I wonder sometimes if the reporters you're talking to even know how to get to our little city of Spanish Fork. But when we sit down and have meaningful discussions like that, I again thank all of you, the elected officials and city staff, for leading a great city, a well-planned city, a well-run city, because it's easy to represent to those people up there that we're doing some really good things in Spanish Fork, and that we've learned from other cities in other stages of growth as well. So that was a productive couple of meetings yesterday. We'll have a board meeting for the league Monday as well, and report on that. Obviously, it starts to get a busy time of the season with the legislative session coming up. So we'll give you probably more information than you want coming up. But the last thing, I don't see him here, but we had the Ryla. Right there. There's one. Come on up. Come on. Where's the rest of your gang?
I know that Peyton and I think it was Cassie didn't come.
Okay, that's all right. You'll represent him well.
Yeah.
I'll let her speak more about what RILA is. To sum it up really quick, we had the youth, and Chris can attest to as a Rotarian that we had these young folks in our last Rotary meeting a week ago and give us a report on the Rotary Youth Leadership Award. And it's an event where they go to and get to meet a lot of other young, pretty high energy and cool kids from all over the state. So tell us who you are, tell us who your parents are,
All right.
and tell us where you go to school and what RILA was.
Cool. My name is Tabitha Whittekind, and my parents are Dave Whittekind and Brooke Whittekind. My grandparents are Norman and Doreen Van Osdol. So I go to American Leadership Academy, which is a charter school here in Spanish Fork, and I attended RILA, which was super fun. So yeah, it's a little leadership conference that Rotary puts on, so Rotary Youth Leadership Award, and it was super fun. I was selected from my school to attend, and it was super cool. I got to know a lot of youth. Most of them were juniors, so they were all around my age. And we focused a lot on how to improve our communities and how to sort of make others feel welcome, which was something that was really cool because I think that's something that we really need to focus on, especially at my age level. And we got to know everybody. We played some activities where we got to just kind of experiment with leadership and teamwork and getting to know each other. One of the activities was a human ladder where there were two people who were right next to each other and they were holding the rung of a ladder and they put it at their hip and somebody had to walk on the ladder. So we had a whole bunch of different pairs and then we had to get a person from one end of a field to another end of a field while they were walking on the rungs that we were holding, which was super cool because as soon as you were done holding the rung and the person had stepped off, you had to immediately hurry and go to the front. So you had to make sure to communicate with each other, and we all had to work together as a team. And that was super cool. So.
Were you a part of that, Whites?
Well, and very impressive group of youth that came and reported to our club. We're excited that they're excited about what Rotary means, about meeting people all over and getting together for a good cause. And so we appreciate you coming and detailing that. One aspect of it is the Rotary can do things called interact clubs, right, that are in your high schools or shared high schools. I invited them to come tonight to maybe rack their brains and maybe up here to see if there was. That's typically a teacher at a school. So I don't know if anybody can think of a teacher at a school that's involved in city government or anything.
Don't know of
Anything? Nobody that's busy, anything like that. That might be able to be a help in leading the Interact Club. Not to put anybody on the spot or anything. Busy with the National Guard.
801-31.
So, anyway, that's what the next step that we look forward to is maybe helping them get that organized and see what we can do because we do have awesome youth in our community and you're one of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, great.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilman Scopes.
Mayor, just a couple of small things. First, to report, the Utah Lake Commission will meet on this Thursday morning, so I'll have more to report on that. Other committees don't take place until January. And then lastly, a couple of things, just we're coming into the holidays, so Chief, if you would please pass our appreciation to all the EMS crews, fire, police department, all those that will be working overtime through the holidays, New Year's Eve, different things like that. Really appreciate all their extra work, the time away from their families to keep us safe and all that they do on a daily basis. We know that holidays seem to be a more dangerous time, ironically, and so really appreciate all the work they do and hope that they're able to stay safe as well as their families through this. And in that vein, we've talked before about the QPR training, the suicide training, awareness training and things. The holidays are, generally speaking, a joyful time. For many people, it does bring memories of loved ones that are lost. or have passed or not here. And so for some people, either because of family situations, other situations, this is not necessarily a happy time. And so just be aware of your friends, neighbors, family members. Just have an eye out for them. Even though you might be enjoying pumpkin pie, it might be something that brings up either a bad memory or a circumstance that they would rather not be in. So with that, Merry Christmas to all, and what a great community to be in for this time of the year. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Beck.
I'd just like to let the residents know that today Dejana Talbot, our reigning Miss Utah, flew out to Connecticut where she will be competing in Miss Utah next Thursday night on December 19th on NBC, I believe. She has a lot to do there. She has some preliminaries, and then on the 19th they'll actually just announce the top 12. Dejana actually was Miss Spanish Fork in 2017. Miss Greater Salt Lake in 2018, and is currently serving as Miss Utah right now and lives in Spanish Fork, so we're super excited. And the mayor and council would like to wish her good luck. Lots of economic development and growth happening right now. We've all been super busy going to ribbon cuttings. Last week, just to name a few, Mobetta's opened up in Cal Ranch parking lot, Hawaiian style food, Lowe's, and yesterday Chili's. So there's new places for everyone to go visit while they're out shopping for the holidays. And I would just like to extend my Christmas wishes to all of the residents in town. It's a wonderful time of year, just echoing what Kiera just said, but it is difficult for a lot of families, so I think it's important to be patient with one another and extend our love and appreciation to one another and do what we can to help. And I'd like to say thank you to our city staff, especially all those who have made our city so beautiful at this time of year with all the lights and decorations. It adds an extra special touch. So Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Councilman Argal.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to echo some of the things that's already been said. Give a shout out to the Parks and Recs, and they're getting our Festival of Lights ready. It's a huge thing for people to come and see that, and they kick it off inviting us all up to our new oaks up there to turn that lawn, and those lights are now on for the next weeks till after Christmas, but they do an awesome job keeping them and getting them ready to go. Also, echo the Chief Adams to your employees as the holidays come on. Also, Jamie, all of your guys, generally we have lots of snow and these guys work lots of time, lots of overtime and lots of extra. Last year was, if anything was like last year, they'll be working. We appreciate what they do to keep our city safe, keep our streets open, and grateful to those in the safety program and our public safety, our ambulances and all of that through the holidays. Wish them a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and also to all the employees and also to the citizens of Spanish Fork. Thank you for a good year. Like Stacy said, there's been a lot going on. There's a lot of new things in our community and more to come, and we're excited for the next year and wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be the last meeting that I'll report on the Chamber of Commerce going-ons, and excuse Heather Youd tonight. She was not able to be here, but like Stacy mentioned, a few great ribbon cuttings in town with Lowe's and Mobetta's and Chili's, and celebrated our Business of the Month last week with Hydro. Some of you may pronounce that Hydro, but it's actually Hydro, and as we sat there, they gave us a presentation on some of the things they do with aluminum extractions and things. They put up a picture of the mayor cutting the board for Lowe's here. But like I say, Hydro, very, very grateful to be able to spend some time with them and see the things that they do. The manager that gave us a tour found out he grew up here in Spanish Fork and has kept his family here. And it's just great to see they're up to about 230 employees. Is that right, Mike? And another great business in town. So congratulate them as the Business of the Month. We've got our new networking lunch coming up next week down at the fairgrounds. And I think that's about all I need to report on the chamber, other than the thank you for all of the participation in the Lights Parade, those that were there and able to brave. Some years are warmer than others, and this was a colder one, but it was another success, and just appreciate all the effort that people put into that. Yesterday had an opportunity to meet with some junior high kids. I know Stacy took a couple classes, and I took a few classes and met with them, and as we watch these kids growing up here in our junior highs, we've got bright futures with some of these kids as they ask a lot of questions of what really does Mayor Leifson do? And I can't lie, so it's a great question. I tell them to try and figure that out.
Don't even go there, Doug.
That's it. Yeah. Set and eat. Okay. Fire station's coming along. Not a lot to report there, but hoping for some warmer temperatures so that we can continue to pour concrete and continue the construction. Hopeful for an opening date in the late summer, early fall of next year. So that continues to progress. Had a meeting last Friday with some of our officials from UMPA and some others from our garbage district, working on a rebate program to be able to bring in your gas lawnmower, and our electrical providers will be able to give you a rebate to turn in your old lawnmower or gas equipment and buy electrical power tools or lawnmowers, snow blowers, and things of that. And as the technology is improved in those things, it's becoming more and more of a viable option, as some may know. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was I see Jamie back in the back there, and just want to appreciate all they do driving the snow plows, him and his guys. We get to walk out of our house whenever we deem fit, where they might be walking out whenever the snow sees fit. So just really appreciate him and his crew. I'm not too proud to admit that when I first got elected 8 years ago, I thought I knew everything about asphalt and had some maybe sharp criticism with paving our own roads here in town, and I'll eat crow on that and tell you that we have the best roads in Utah, and I'm so proud of Jamie and his crew and what they do. And so just want to recognize you back there in the back. I know you love public attention, so just want to draw everybody's attention and gaze at you at this moment. Mayor, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. One item that we forgot to mention with all the openings, Macy's reopened with their big remodel of their store, and if you haven't been in it, go in it. It's pretty awesome. So we want to add that to all the things that were opened up here. Just to mention, I received an email from the vice president of the 4 food groups about the Mobetta opening, and he said that was the strongest opening in history here in Spanish Fork they've had for their that store. So kudos to Spanish Fork for supporting stores like that. And I tell people, bring your restaurants. We eat here in Spanish Fork. We like to eat. So
Sit and eat.
so,
Yeah.
That's right. So I would like to invite the rodeo committee up. I looked down here, and my first thought was the Fearsome Foursome, the old Los Angeles Rams front line, defensive line. But, they'd like to do some presentations for us.
So, Mayor and Council, we're back from our annual PRCA convention trip, which happens down in Las Vegas last week. I think everybody will agree with me, probably the worst trip we've had, at least in the 4 years I've been here. We were one guy down. We quickly learned that guy got us into all the exclusive parties, and it really put a damper on everything we do. So
Yeah.
yeah. So Mayor, know you were missed. I think we all echo that. But
Thank you.
the convention was really good. We backing up a little bit. We have the step before the National Finals Rodeos, the circuit finals, and we're a part of the Wilderness Circuit, which is Utah, Idaho, and Nevada. And one of those plaques there, we were voted by the contestants as the top rodeo, large rodeo, in the state of Utah.
Want to hold that up?
Yes, sir.
Just hold that up. and they'll show that.
So a pretty fun award. I love that award because that truly comes from the contestants. They vote. I don't know the total duration, but we've won that a lot of times. So a streak we hope to keep going for sure. The other award that you have there, that award comes from Justin Boots, and the barrel racers vote on that award. It's for the best footing, and again in the wilderness circuit. And we were lucky enough to win that award down there. And that award is really important and neat to me. We put a lot of effort into our fairgrounds and the footing there. We have the soil sampled, tested to make sure the different sizes are right, to make it as safe and as fast as we possibly can. A big part of that award is the riding club. After every barrel racer, whether it be in the rodeo or in the slack, they hand rake the barrels. I'm sure you guys have probably seen them at the rodeo, but that's a little touch that we do that kind of goes above and beyond what most people do. And the other big factor that plays into that, I want to invite Landon Andrews up here with me. Landon is our lead worker at the fairgrounds, and he is the guy that preps the ground, takes care of all of that for us. So my first year, 3 years ago, it's about a week before the rodeo, and we have a ton of stuff to do. I mean, we're running around. Well, Landon's watering the arena, working it, and in my mind, taking 3 times as long as he needs to when there's nothing in there for a week. So I head over there and, hey, what's going on? And he starts geeking out on every grain of sand has to be wet on every side and to make it consistent. And looking back, it makes complete sense. He wants the very first barrel racer or saddle bronc horse to have the same footing as the last one. But he takes a lot of pride in what he does. He's very good at it. He seeks out knowledge and tries different things throughout the year to see how that works and tweaks it. So really, in my mind, that award is much more a tribute to Landon and the hand rakers than it is to any of us, for sure. So thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Landon.
Yeah, so that kind of recaps. I would like to thank the Diamond Fork Riding Club, our partner in the rodeo. We couldn't do it without them. They're a huge and vital part. The mayor and council for your support. The city staff. I love when we go to that national convention. All the other rodeo committees are amazed when I have the mayor there and the city manager and the Parks and Recreation director. They're all so envious that we get that support from our city, and that all comes down from you guys. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job. They do a great job. That committee, it's been fun. I really hated to miss going down with them this year, but I had my shoulder replaced, and Seth said he wouldn't dress me each day while I was down there. So they do a great job, and they represent well. Spanish Fork is well renowned down there at the NFR and across the nation. People know about our rodeo and how great our committee and citizens are. So we appreciate each and every one of them. I had our UMPA meeting yesterday, last night, and a lot of good things happening with our partner there in our power. They're continuing to find resources to help keep our rates low. As you'll know, our rates are lower than most in the state, and that's because of the good work that these guys do. They just purchased some power down in Arizona off a reservation down there, and so That's our newest one that we just got, and so it's going to be added to our arsenal of power, which was really good. The other thing, just wanted to mention, I know we don't have any snow out there yet, but I have a feeling it will come. And so I would just appreciate everyone, be careful out there as you're driving, especially with the kids going to school when we're getting more snow and stuff like that. Slow down, watch for those kids, especially around the school zone. You know, we want everybody to have a happy and Merry Christmas, and let's not have any accidents out there that would hinder that for some family. So with that, leads right into 101. The man, the myth, the legend.
The guy that likes to hide in the back. Mayor, Council, thanks for having me here today. Thanks for the kind words. I was asked to just come and give a brief description of our plowing methods and whatnot. We've got the city broke down by priority. We run at priority 1, which is major road, schools, steep slopes. Priority 2s are all collector roads. 3 are residential roads. Priority 4s are cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets. One of the things that we probably need to talk about is while it's snowing and while it's accumulating, we pound priority 1 and 2 roads. That's all we do. When the snow stops, we'll start spreading out into priority 3s, priority 4s. Some of the questions that we get is, you know, why haven't you been there yet? If it's a good heavy storm, we may hit the same handful of streets just over and over and over. So that's kind of a brief description of our priorities. I know he handed it to me. Which one?
You want me to hear it? Click it for you.
Just click it. I can't even see it. This is the blue.
There you go.
10-year history. With the growth and everything that we've had, we're up to roughly 155 center lane miles. The center lane mile is basically defined as if you get right in the middle of the road, drive straight down the street 1 mile, that's 1 center lane mile. With that being said, our town's up to 155. 10 years ago, we were at 125. Each truck, we have roughly the same amount of trucks we had then. Each truck's responsible for roughly now 26 center lane miles. If you take an average of 3 passes per street, and that's just kind of an average. Some streets will 2, center streets like 8, 9. So if you take an average of 3 passes per truck, each truck has to plow about 78 miles in every snowstorm once the snow stops. We've got 4 dump trucks. They've got plow solers, 12-foot plows. As they're turned sideways, they cover about 10 feet. 2 2-ton trucks, same deal, but they have 10-foot plows sideways. We're only covering 8 feet. The smaller trucks are used in the cul-de-sac areas, the dead-end areas. We do get several calls that our big trucks will turn and miss this street or that street. It's kind of done on purpose. If it's a dead-end road, a cul-de-sac, something like that, it's too dangerous for our big trucks to come in there and back out. The smaller trucks we can see better, and that's on the smaller trucks hit list. So like I said, overall, we've gained roughly 30 miles of road in the last 10 years since we started this tracking. Very first snowstorm of the year. Chris has got to hit the play button.
He needs to get access to the video. That's not hard to do. Oh, who owns the video?
Okay, I'll sell you the rights to it.
Uh-oh.
Right.
So one of our drivers took that video.
Here, let me see. This is one of the drivers.
Yeah.
So this would be on, is this on our website too?
I don't know if they got put on the website or not. I sent it to Chris.
Here's got.
Has an SFCN 17 logo in the top left.
That one's the next slide, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is the next one. Yeah.
More than one way to skin it.
While we're waiting, one of the issues that we have is parking. We're working very closely with city officials, Steve and the police department. We don't necessarily want to go out and get mean and tough on this. We're trying to push education. Please, citizens, do it on your own. So that's the approach we're going to take for the next little while. We're going to flood the media. We're going to send out a few reverse type text messages, phone calls, stuff of that nature, pre-warning them, asking them. But we're still working, trying to figure out whether we're going to really start getting tough on this. If we can get help from the citizens, I'd prefer not to. We do have, as far as Utah County goes, we do have one of the softest type parking ordinances. And I'm okay with that, if we can just get the participation.
Let's see, we've probably got 15 seconds. Do you want to count down from 10?
I come with my cliff notes at the mayor's request.
Uh-huh.
I'm past my due mark already.
You know,
You're doing great.
I've been doing that my whole life
No
with you,
song and
and you're
dance.
always going past your dew point.
Well, and I was just, four slides really short, and I got it.
Maybe you can tell about the stories when you and I were coaching together.
No,
let's not- let's not.
Probably can't come out.
We better not.
All right, here we go.
All right, so this is the first one. If, like the opposite side, if you was to look over 3/4 of a plow, you can't see period. So the sticks is basically what he's trying to drive off. That's, and it gets a little tight. One of the things that I did fail to mention, and one of the reasons that video was there, on average, our crews have to average about 12 to 15 miles an hour. And we can cover the town with what we have in a 12-hour period. That factors in stopping to refill for salt, fuel, mechanical type things. So anyway, like I said, with that video, that's one of the biggest problems that we face, is we have to slow down just to a crawl to get through some of these streets. It cuts our efficiency, it cuts our time to get through the town. We're going to try to do it through the citizens. We're going to try to just push it and not really try to break down on the enforcement. This is one of the tools that we're using to do that.
During winter months, Spanish Fork City is committed to removing snow and ice from public roads as quickly as possible to provide safe travel for citizens. City ordinances regarding snow removal requires residents to remove vehicles from public streets once snow begins accumulating for up to 48 hours. Doing so allows streets to be cleared more thoroughly and creates less incidents of damaged vehicles or trailers during plowing operations. The mayor has authority to extend the 48 hours in the event of an unusually large storm. You can assist in snow removal operations in several other ways. Travel at a safe distance from snowplows at all times. Never pass or attempt to stop a snow removal vehicle. Advise children never to play near or in a snowbank near the roadway. Exercise extreme caution when driving in inclement weather. Safety for you, other motorists, and pedestrians is the highest priority. For more information, visit SpanishFork.org and the city's social media pages.
That's all I have. You guys have any questions?
Good luck out there.
Appreciate the work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Appreciate you, buddy. They do a great job, and we're sure appreciative of those people that get out in the early morning to go do that. So, thank you. All right, let's move on to consent items.
Motion to approve the consent items.
Second?
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing. We're going to first one, ordinance 25-19, making amendments to the land use ordinance, making text amendments to the residential 4 and commercial 1 zones and adding definition.
Mayor, thank you. There are 4 different parts to this. I'm going to ask that you address them one at a time and that we start with the proposed changes to the commercial 1 zone. I will mention this relative to all of the proposed changes. The Planning Commission and the Development Review Committee both have reviewed them and have recommended that they be approved. And to be as succinct as I can be, relative to the changes to the text of the, sometimes we call it the neighborhood commercial zone, again, C1 zone as well. I think really the only thing that maybe we need to spend time talking about tonight are related to things we need to talk about. It's about hours of operation and the proposal to eliminate the restriction on the hours of operation for particular businesses. The changes that are before you tonight are identical to what was reviewed, I think at that time fairly casually, when a zoning map amendment was made this past month. And I'll just leave it at that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has. And for all of these changes, a public hearing is required.
Okay, so you want us to go to a public hearing for each one?
I'll leave that up to you.
We can do that. That's fine. Okay. We might have some questions after, but let's go into public hearing. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second?
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilmember Beck. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're in a public hearing. Anyone that'd like to come and talk about this issue, come up, give us your name. You have 3 minutes. We'll have the clock up here, and we're going to stick to it. So.
All right. Thank you very much. My name's Rachel Heath. You probably remember me from last month's meeting where you approved the C1, and we're so grateful that you did, because I think it's really going to be a good thing for our neighborhood. The only thing that I take issue with is in the verbiage is completely striking the hours of operation, because I feel like that's a defining characteristic of the C1 commercial. And with the types of businesses that are listed as possible tenants of C1 zoning, it wouldn't really affect them because they are working in the day. Anyway,
You're okay.
Hey, anyway, so like you guys all got my email last week after the Planning Commission meeting, and so I don't really have a lot to add other than I'm not protesting existing businesses. The main thing I'm concerned about is the future growth of businesses, particularly by our neighborhood, because it eliminates the possibility of changing it in the future. If it's stricken now, there's no going back. I guess in short, yeah, that's pretty much, so that's why I suggest to broaden it to from 6, because currently the verbiage says 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., but broadening that to 5 a.m. to midnight would take care of 99% of the businesses that would be in this type of zone with no problems. And then if you were to go into and rezoning current areas that are maybe would be considered good contenders, as Dave has mentioned, for the C1 zoning, grandfather them in if their hours are already in operation outside of those of that time period. I'm not looking to change existing businesses, but my real concern is the potential, the future businesses that will be moving into the area. Yeah, I think, does that make sense?
You're doing
Sorry,
fine.
I'm here miraculously. I broke out in hives 7 hours ago after getting my allergy shot and nearly used my EpiPen and went to the emergency room.
Oh.
So,
We're glad you're here.
yes,
We're definitely glad you're
very
you're
large
okay.
doses. I took like the max dose of Benadryl, and I'm not broken out anymore. So,
Right.
anyway, I think that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else would like to come up? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Gordon,
Second.
second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Just one thing that I would like maybe just to say, you know, a lot of times as the council, yeah, we do have the opportunity to kind of tell businesses some things we'd like them to do and things like that. So, yeah, we can do that. I'm very uncomfortable telling businesses when they can operate. That's one thing. I think that should be market-driven, because a lot of times if a 24-hour store, if they're not making money, it might not be profitable for them to stay open all the time. So I think that's something the market should drive and not be dictated by the city or the council. That's my 2 cents. Anyone else would like to make a comment?
So Mayor, are you gonna do each one of these items that he has, or are we gonna do the whole thing? I have a comment on the R4. I didn't know if he was gonna go back to.
Well, I think what we'll do, I think the ordinance is just one ordinance. And so what we'll do is maybe go through each one of these one at a time, and then we will make a vote on the whole thing.
Okay. So this is concerning this commercial one?
Right.
Okay.
So if there's not any other comment on that, Dave, you want to move to the next one?
How do you feel, Junior, about them acting on each one individually?
The ordinance has them all together. I prefer you did that, and we can modify or move things around as you do that.
The proposed changes to the R4 zone, frankly, I think those are best heard with, I think it's item 8C. The proposed apartment development with the zone change there, that would be going a little bit out of order. The other 2 changes, the definitions, those I think are probably quite a bit easier to digest.
Okay. So this is just on this ordinance, just this one, right?
Well, just on the topic of the proposed changes to the neighborhood commercial
Right.
zone. But if you'd like, I could go ahead and just touch really briefly on the proposed definition of the pending ordinance, which is only that. It's a change that would define what a pending ordinance is. The proposed definition, and this is coming about by way of recommendation of our attorney, Mr. Baker. I really appreciate him having us put this language in the code. The language, I think, reflects accurately what our practice has been and what the practice of most communities is when a proposed change to our zoning law is initiated and when that goes into effect and for how long that can be taken in effect, if you will, before the council acts on a change. That's what that definition is proposed to simply clarify and get in black and white. The other change has to do with, this again, just on the definitions, defining really what a truck stop is. I think there are a few locations in the community in Spanish Fork on either of the two likely candidate routes where someone would want to operate such a business, where we could accommodate them, to where that type of a business could be located without causing some very, very significant issues from a number of different perspectives. So the concept here is to define essentially what a truck stop is, called travel center, and then to specify where that could be located, I believe as a conditional use, in a very specific geography within an area that would be zoned Industrial 1. So that the travel center definition and the pending ordinance definition are two of the other four changes that are proposed. The R4 is the other one. I'm happy to touch on that now as well, but I think it'll make maybe more sense as we're discussing, again, that other item on your agenda.
As when we're talking about the next ordinance?
I think it's the one after the next one, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does this cover everything in the 25-19 that you're talking right now?
That does, except for R4. That part of what is
So
included.
do we
in
need,
ordinance.
tell me how you want this done, Junior, so.
So, I'd say let's not take the vote on this ordinance until you look at
The other one.
R4.
And after that public hearing, you can vote on both of them.
Okay. All right.
Ordinance, is that C, what you're saying, so the ridgeline development, right?
That's the one.
Okay.
Okay, so we're good here. We've done here. Now we can move on to the next one.
So now we need to go into public hearing for,
Do we need to go in public hearing for what he just said? Okay.
For B, for the next one.
Well, for the next
well,
one.
for really the other two items of A.
Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
So we need a public hearing for what he just said here. So I need a
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second?
a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilmember Beck. And we are in public hearing. Anyone that'd like to talk about what just Dave talked about, his
Pending
definition?
ordinance. Pending
Pending
ordinance and
ordinance.
travel center.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Councilman Hall, second by Councilman Scobes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, now let's go ordinance Z 14-19, changing the zoning designation, amending the official zoning map of Spanish Fork for River Run Townhome Zone change. Is that right?
Precisely, yeah.
Thank you.
About 25 acres located not too far off of Main Street to the east. It's adjacent to Annie's Acres. For me, that's now kind of a landmark in this part of the community. North of South Lane, not in what we like to call the river bottoms, but pretty close to it. So this is Main Street here. North is to our left on this image. Annie's Acres is right here. Again, South Lane right here. The proposal is to construct, or at least now to approve, a preliminary plat for 198 townhomes. The project has been reviewed by both the Planning Commission and the Development Review Committee, and it's been approved with some fairly specific conditions. But before I touch on those, the subject property is currently general planned for high-density residential. That designation allows for up to 12 units to the acre as the project is currently designed. On the part of the property that doesn't include this area right here, they're at just under 10 units to the acre, and I'll touch on this in just a minute as well. So with that particular density, they're well under what we would consider to be consistent with the provisions of the R3 zone and that high-density residential general plan designation, kind of the land use pattern philosophy that's employed here. It's not unlike what we try to do in other parts of the community. The intersection of Volunteer Drive and Main Street is right here. We do anticipate, maybe not exactly there, it's in this area right here. We anticipate that a road will connect this project and Main Street, turning that into a four-way intersection, and that road will be a fairly heavily traveled route, collecting traffic from areas north and east of the river bottoms, potentially making this site a viable candidate for some type of significant non-residential use. So adjacent to a project like that, typically you try to utilize some kind of fairly intense residential development to create a gradual transition from the intense commercial project to eventually relatively low intensity residential development. So you go from, in this case, commercial to high density residential to medium density residential with Annie's Acres and so forth, moving farther to the east. This is a project that we've been talking about for quite a while. The applicant, I appreciate, has been honestly very responsive, very good to work with, to the extent that they have set this land aside for potential purchase by Spanish Fork City. I don't believe there have been any details ironed out relative to that. I believe the applicant's perspective is that that would happen likely a few years from now, as they get towards the end of the life and development of the subject property. I think that maybe having some type of framework in mind relative to how that transaction would happen makes some sense. We are suggesting that, you know, perhaps some type of purchase arrangement be addressed in some form as part of a development agreement with the subject property. But again, I appreciate the fact that they're willing to at least leave that placeholder there, should the city want to act to purchase that in the future. If that doesn't happen, they do have additional density that they could use to develop that further. I would expect that that would happen in some fashion that's similar to what we're seeing here. Considerable thought has been given relative to the design of the project. It's both fortunate and I think maybe regrettable that with the narrowness of the property and just its configuration, it lends itself to a really repetitive design in terms of how the structures get laid out, all accessed, at least primarily accessed on one street. An arrangement that could lead to a pretty monotonous type of look for the community. The applicant has taken steps to try to break that look up as you drive through, you know, really the one public street in the neighborhood. Breaks of landscaping, open space periodically. This would be the pretty part of the project, less attractive rear-loading garage units. So all the homes would front onto a courtyard. The corners of the buildings that face the street would have the entrance facing the street. And I think we have an image that maybe shows what that would look like a little bit better here. So this would be the elevation that you'd see driving down the street. And even configured this way, the way we're looking at it, I don't think does justice to what things would look like, you know, with this particularly straight-on image that we have here of the east and west facing elevations of the buildings. The applicant has done what I think a good designer would do in terms of providing quite a bit of relief. That is to say that the building elevations are not just one straight plane, but there is considerable variety as you go from one part of the homes or one part of the structure to another, that I think really will help make that repetitive feel for the project disappear. Landscaping is another key to minimizing that part of the project. Tree-lined street, pretty lavish landscaping adjacent to the buildings themselves, and different things like that, I think will honestly make this one of the better looking projects like this that we've presented to you. The amenity package that the applicant has proposed is substantial compared with other townhome developments that we've been asked to approve: a pool, a clubhouse, multiple playgrounds, a dog park, different things like that, which, along with making this a nice community and a nice neighborhood, frankly, I think in today's market are really what the customers demand. So I think the design that we're looking at speaks to the developer's experience and their ability to make it, again, a nice neighborhood. The proposal is consistent with the city's general plan. I think this is a good fit with what the folks are working to do next door with Annie's Acres. It certainly is different. But that all being said, probably the majority of the discussion that happened in the Planning Commission meeting, and certainly something that has consumed a lot of staff time recently, is traffic. Traffic on South Lane, traffic on River Bottoms Road, traffic on Bradford Lane, traffic in this part of the community. I don't want to oversimplify the issue at all, and we can certainly talk about it in as much detail as you want. From my perspective, the reality is that we would have a traffic problem whether Annie's Acres was happening or not. The traffic counts on River Bottoms Road and South Lane, I'm certain, have increased steadily over the course of the past several decades. As development continues to the east of this area, whether it's in Spanish Fort, Salem, Utah County, or whatever, those traffic volumes are going to continue to increase. The best chance that we have, and I'm just speaking from, I think, the experience that we have as a community and what other communities have experienced, is to have developers do what they do, which is to fix roads, to build new roads. And that's not to say that the problem's going to get better before it gets worse. Frankly, I don't think that's the case. But in particular with this project and Annie's Acres, and the requirement that we're suggesting be in play here, which is identical to what the folks with Annie's Acres are working with, which would require this connection to be made to Main Street before there could be a 93rd home constructed in those two developments. That is cumulatively in those two developments. And that they have a second access in some direction each project before they can get beyond their 51st home. I think that is the best way to try to accelerate road improvements in this area. And again, as we're seeing now, and I really appreciate, I don't enjoy, I say I appreciate, I think I can imagine how difficult it is for the Ellsworths and some other folks that are dealing with the immediate construction issues that Annie's Acres has brought. I won't pretend to say that those situations are going to get better real soon, although we hope that there's some relief real soon. But maybe looking down the road in the next year, if Annie's Acres finishes off their frontage, these folks do the same thing, and before, for example, with this project, they could get to their second phase, there's work on this connection here over to Main Street, which would probably be the impetus for us, making South Lane a very, very unattractive route for people to take. Whether that means closing it all together, which long-term is in the works, that is the plan, or something else. I think those are the types of things that, again, hopefully sooner than later, but long-term certainly are what will help alleviate things like this awful corner that we have right here, and eventually with other development improvements at other intersections in the area that are not designed to operate the way that we would expect them to, different things like that. So I mentioned that just to recognize that we understand that traffic certainly is a very legitimate concern. I mentioned a couple of parameters earlier, that 92 home threshold. That's not something that we arbitrarily came up with. There was a traffic study that was done, I believe, about a year ago, that several different stakeholders in the area were invited to provide input on, and that threshold is something that came from the consultant that provided that traffic study. So that being said, we do recommend that both the zone change to R3 and the preliminary plat be approved, subject to the applicant entering into a development agreement, which among other things would subject them to those thresholds on the 92 homes between their project and Annie's Acres, and 50 homes and theirs alone, before we have a second access provided.
Right. We might have some more questions for you. I'd entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Councilman Argal, a second by Councilman Gordon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone that'd like to come talk about this zone change ordinance, you're welcome to come on up. Hey, I can relate with this guy. Yeah.
Try not to look at it.
What did you do?
I know it's gross. I broke my arm in half right here.
No.
Turkey
Anybody
bowl.
want to take a guess how?
Thanksgiving turkey bowl.
No, dirt bike. Dirt bike.
Oh, yeah.
I'm done with that, according to my wife.
There you go, smart man.
I'm Sam Drown. I'm the developer / builder. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the staff and I don't know how long it's been since we started working on this, but it's been a lot. We've exhausted so many different things on this project. I think we're finally to a place where at least everybody can live with what we're doing. And we had a good neighborhood meeting. We've had many meetings with the staff, and things went well at Planning Commission. Dave actually covered it beautifully. For out of respect for time, I just like to offer up my time for any questions that you have. So.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up and talk?
My name is Chris Ellsworth, and we are the only ones that live kind of out in the mud part right now. Anyway, I'm not against this development, and I'm not against Annie's Acres, and I'd just like to tell you how much I appreciate Dave and Mike for helping us with some of the issues we've had out there, which I've been informed that are going to get worse before they get better. The only question I have is one about parking, because, you know, like on the snow plow thing, you know, you have all the parking. Just concerned about that with South Lane and the other. And then also, as mentioned, is traffic, as the construction starts on this one, we would kind of like to know where they're going in and out, because right now they've been going in and out on both sides of my house, which has made a mess. And like I said, Dave has been very helpful in trying to get that taken care of. So that's the concerns that I have, are the different construction things and different things like that are coming down. If it's going to keep the road closed any longer than what it already has, which has been quite a while. And so those are the concerns that I have. It's not necessarily with the developments, it's with the traffic and the different things that it causes, with people still coming down and going past the road closed signs and different things like that, which you guys can't control either. But those are just my concerns that we have down in there.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Anyone else?
Wayne Peterson. I'm president of Southeast Irrigation Company, and we're very concerned about South Lane there. They'll have to pipe that little section what McKells are gonna develop there, but then we have an open ditch from there to Main Street. And if you've ever been out on that road, that's a 22-foot wide road. It's got a sewer line now, it's got a drain line, it'll have pressurized irrigation, culinary water, and our ditch. And we're very concerned about the liability on that open ditch for that maybe quarter of a mile there. And we're really concerned about that because you have all that traffic on South Lane, somebody's gonna end up in that ditch. And we're, as an irrigation company, we're very concerned about that. Other than that, that's our main concern.
Okay, thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any questions, comments? Maybe discuss some of those issues.
I'll go ahead and start because I have some kind of a long list of concerns. I know that some of these addressed. I met with Dave and watched the commission meetings and answered quite a few of my questions. And I know that some of the timelines as this development goes on, those timelines fix some of these issues. But getting to them issues, I have a real concern about the roads. Southfield Road is already being overrun. People coming from clear up the road are coming down that road. So fixing that, even though these two developments develop in the front part of it, this farm ground is still there, and that road is barely good enough for one road. And I have talked with Dave about that, and I have seen the highway plan that fixes some of this, but it doesn't fix it till we get down this road, down the road with these densities, with these timelines, and the construction that's going on. Annie's Acres spent, as you expressed, spent a lot of time working on their development and making it so this is river bottoms to me, making it look like it fit in the river bottoms. Their density is less, and they preserved open space and stuff like that. The R3 is a high density, and it worries me that the McKell family have a lot of ground in this area, and there are other owners that once we approve something this dense, then of course they're going to expect that density also. I have an issue with that, with the density on it. Right now, there are very few services in this end of town. If this is built, this will be almost 300 homes. That's 600 cars. Everybody has two. There's no alternate route out of this development, either one of these. So they all have to come to Main Street, and the services are on our north side of town. So that means 600 cars are going to have to drive down already crowded Main Street. UTA, I wished we had better mass transit services. We've grown over the last 12, or I think Dave said 14 years, and we haven't changed in this town. And if they build it, they will come is kind of the reason, but we pay a lot of money for UTA, and I wish there was some more options for UTA for these large developments, because that's a lot of traffic that's going to go on the streets that are already, and even if we do get volunteer lane, and if we did was to limit or close that Southfield Road, there are 3 homes, Ellsworth's on it, then that puts them down through that subdivision, and using that road, it's just, to me, seems crowded already. The density part of it in this river bottoms concerns me, because that is a lot of homes in a really small area, and we've got to get them out of there. And right now there's, even if when they do volunteers, there are only going to be one road out of there. And I know what you said, 92, I think, Dave, is that what, before they have to have that second road? So 92 units is to be developed before they can get that 92 developed. So that's another 100 units that'll be there. And counting Annie's Acres, I think they're 97, and I think their first phase is 27. I think your first phase is 48. Is that correct, if you do? Yes. So there's almost 75 homes that will be traveling down that south line. So I'm concerned about the traffic. We are struggling with traffic in this town, and I know that it's the development that fixes that traffic. As I watched, you guys talked about that you're in communication with this commercial piece of ground to build this road, and also with the Bradfords to get this road done, because you've got to both work together in order to get this done. But those are my concerns, and I really worry that this dense of a development impacts us to a point where it would essentially shut these roads down. And that worries me. And I mean, community and our main street, I wish we had more stores on the other end of town, but we don't. When we may in the future as it builds out, and it does go, Intermountain Farmers Road does go straight out to the freeway, which that would be a great thing. But Southfield Road is not a good road right now to get on and go south, because you have to do a right-hand turn across several lanes of traffic. So just some concerns that I have as I've looked over this development. I know a lot of them was addressed and have been talked about as the commission looked at them and talked about them and talked them out. But I still have those concerns as this many units, the two together, Annie's Acres and River Run, are developed and built out, even to their first phases. So, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a quick comment. I heard rumors that they were going to ask for 18 units per acre, and it's 10. Is that correct?
Originally, yes, there was some talk about more than 12 units to the acre.
Okay. But we're looking at 10?
Less than 10 today.
Okay. So I'm pleasantly surprised that we're looking at 10 units per acre. And then can this development be held up once we hit the point of needing the second road? Like, what if that person that owns that land between Main Street and this development doesn't want to sell or something? Can that hold up the whole entire development?
Both Annie's Acres and this developer would be at that risk. They'd have to work with this property owner. There might be one other route that they could use to make that connection, but that is the risk, and I think they understand.
All right.
There's also a threshold for utility, is there not?
Yeah, and that's more the 50, really. It's both an
Smaller.
access and a utility, so I think...
To loop the water.
Water's the key. You have to have water constructed.
Dave, what has been discussed in terms of the ditch safety, if anything, that you could comment on?
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little bit embarrassed. Nothing out of the ordinary that I'm aware of. So we have kind of a standard practice relative to what we require developers to do to pipe ditches and different things like that. The fact that it hasn't been discussed is a really, at least in discussions that I've been around, for me is a good sign. It makes me feel like there's not a red flag there, but Chris, yeah, I'll let Chris speak to that.
So I don't know of a legal way we could make them pipe that ditch off-site. In fact, state law doesn't permit us to really require them to do things on-site as much as sometimes we'd like. And so even if that ditch is a hazard being close to the road, it was before, and I can't think, and maybe Junior could respond to this, but I can't think of a legal way we could ever make them pipe it. And so that's really why it hasn't been discussed. It's just not something that we have in our toolbox.
How long is it? The distance?
I'm guessing 200 to 300 feet, maybe 400.
And there's a ditch actually on both sides. But this side of it's to water the fields, the other side's to feed the fields.
Long term,
But
that's not the main road, right?
long term, it probably goes away. If you look down the road as the farms, but that's feeding the ditch that Wayne's talking about. That's feeding all the way down to him and down to the back of the fairgrounds. Well, back this way, some of it. So yeah, it goes through the fields, but going down along Southfield Road, that ditch goes to the Hankses and then stops as it feeds Kent's property, and then on the other side. They've been really good to keep it clean. It's not been easy as they've been putting in the water and stuff. Not that there's any water flowing in it right now, but that will come as summer comes along. And the issue that Wayne's talking about is always an issue with somebody running into it as the traffic increases, because it's a narrow road.
It really is. There's a lot of accidents along this road, and piping that ditch is incredibly expensive. It's not something that the city really has funds that we can go in and do it. I don't believe there's any legal way we could force a developer to do it, and so that's kind of where we're at.
They'll pipe what's in front, their improvement, right?
Correct.
They did across, yeah, okay.
So any acres and this will have to pipe that?
Yeah, they'll both have piped it, and as development occurs, it'll get piped, and that'll be corrected.
Yep, come on up.
Maybe Trent can speak for his own project, but that property's in the works to be developed too, so that problem might go away sooner than later.
It's good to know. Any other questions or comments?
That ditch has water in it 24/7.
Okay.
Because it's spring ditch.
Right. Yeah, every time I've driven down there, there's been water. I always had water in it. Yep.
I was just going to say that concern has been echoed at a couple of different, actually, developments in the city that have townhomes next to them. If you remember, one up by Expressway Lane that we've talked about expanding that townhome, and it just happens to be one that I travel more than I travel this. But the development that has happened is what's taking care of some of that problem, and now I see a for sale sign on the other side of that where I'm always worried about maybe going in that ditch there. So to echo what Chad said, that is the solution to a lot of this is development happening. I think it's smart policy to put restrictions in saying this is how far you can go, this is how many people can go there. So yeah, while in the end you have 300 new units with 2 cars is 600 people, that doesn't happen without some major improvements to this area either. If you're from Spanish Fork, you should share the frustration with everybody that UTA isn't fast enough and that we've paid decades and decades for it. I would say when we mention that up to UTA, up to UDOT stuff, their response is, hey, we're taking care of things north of you that do in a way, their sales pitch back to me all the time is that affects you because we've got people traveling BRT that weren't before. So whenever you need to go over to Provo, and we don't tell the mayor when we need to go over to Provo because he's shop local mayor, but there's some aspect of front runner and of the BRT system close to us that is taking some of those vehicles off the road so we can get to where we need to be. But we hope that smart planning continues to do that. Just to echo what I first said here at tonight's council meeting of some places I've been even this week, is this diversity of housing is important in our community. SB 34 was a bill passed last legislative session that was directed to the state as a whole to talk about moderate housing. And I'm happy to report we're one of those cities that can say we're abiding by that legislation, by that bill. And the important aspect of that is that while our community's housing changes and the diversity of it happens, is that the reason why people live here, we want to make sure that's what we protect. And I think that's what we do the best on a local level as local elected officials, is to say we're protecting that quality of life and striking the balance in doing that, making a place available for 55 and older to live in Annie's Acres, and now River Run, a place for more affordable housing to go when compared to single family dwelling on a quarter and third acre in town. So that's the balance that we as elected officials, staff, and residents need to strike, is that events like last Friday night, the Christmas Box Angel, where grieving families that have lost little ones can come together at a cemetery and share an experience. And these people from all walks of life and brand new to the community, down to Councilman Davis that helps organize the thing that's been here forever. That's the important thing that we need to protect in this community, is the quality of life, that we all come together and enjoy each other's company regardless of what size of house we live in. So I appreciate the months, years almost of planning both of these developments have taken, and I appreciate, I think we've struck that balance, even though it's taken quite a bit of time, that we've struck the balance of making it a place that some of the improvements happen, and then it can't go forward without some more significant investment and improvements happening as well. That's my 2 cents, Mayor.
Appreciate.
Well, just to piggyback on what Councilman Mendenhall mentioned, is that the state legislature, and this has been mentioned before, they're looking at affordable housing throughout the state, and one of the risks that we run if we don't allow for affordable housing for higher density in our community, the state will come down and tell us. It won't be, we will be voluntold where this goes. So, as Councilman Mendenhall had mentioned, I appreciate both developments. Working and finding something that fits in our community. The state very easily could come and say, no, they will be 20 units to the acre rather than the 8 and 10 and things that we see in these two developments. So appreciate the patience on all parties, but certainly of those that are developing the area, trying to find something that works for our community and something that we can show the state that we are trying to build the inventory that we need in affordable housing. Really, so that they allow cities to be the land use authority rather than the state. So, just to piggyback on that, that is a pressing issue in the legislature, and really just appreciate that. Mayor, do you also want comments on the definitions and things as well, or just this?
Do I have a choice?
Well, if we're doing it, okay. So, because these are all lumped together, correct?
Well, we're gonna do separate ordinance, but go ahead.
Are we? Okay.
But go ahead, because now's the time to talk about it, because our next step is to vote.
Okay, and that's what I want to double check.
May I make a comment just to what he said?
Yep.
I would like to interrupt him, if I could.
Yes, you may interrupt him.
Interestingly, the state, to the concern that Councilman Argyle raised, the state wants us to put more of these types of, I'll try to get my mouse up here, wants us to put more of these types of facilities closer to state roads such as Main Street and Arrowhead that runs out to the freeway. They actually want that. And our concern, we know how busy our Main Street is, and there are things in the works hopefully to make it flow better. But this is where those densities are wanted, at least from the state's point of view, because they put heavy investment in these facilities, and so it is a dilemma that we have, because they will look at that and say these are areas where they need to be.
Okay. Go ahead, Peter.
Just on the other topics, for this ordinance, or at least for this vote, the pending ordinance, travel center definitions, I don't have any issues with that. I appreciate staff input on those. And then the commercial 1 zone, my thoughts and feelings are, it's been expressed in watching the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have commercial 2 to the south end of Highway 6, commercial 1 on the north side. I think that's a nice buffer. It was mentioned that commercial 2 was through the whole area, which it was, long before the houses were there. As had been mentioned, I think the C1 zone is a nice buffer, kind of going from that heavier, leading up into the residential areas. However, at the same time, part of the proposal was that, the proposal before us, not addressing thoughts to the other. The proposal is to strike it. I don't have a problem with striking it. There was some discussion as leaving it in, but that applicants could apply for 24 hours. I see that as over-regulation, only in that if they can apply to have a 24-hour business, why would we add an extra step to that process if they could simply apply for it and get it anyway? That's just how I feel regarding that issue as well. I think the C1 is a nice buffer. It works well, but I don't see the need for additional regulation.
All right.
Just one more personal privilege on that, because Keir reminded me of it. On the 24-hour thought was, I mentioned last meeting that we had, the 24-hour job that I had was on Highway 6 at the Jackrabbit. It's not there. It's there, but it's not 24 hours anymore. But it was when I worked there when I was 17. The only other two 24-hour jobs that I have happen to actually be on Highway 6. So way up the canyon at the power plant, or at the, what do we call it? The diversion dam.
Diversion dam.
We won't tell the joke because it's kind of, has the word diversion dam in it. You've heard it, yep. But that's where I worked 24 hours at the same age, 16, 17-year-old. The other 24-hour job I had was the gym across from where Chad lives, at the World Gym, when it was 24 hours. I can't honestly say that I stayed awake all 24 hours. I think there's probably quite a few people that came in and got to go to the gym for free sometimes when I happened to snooze off. But that was the other 24-hour job that I had. So my 24-hour jobs have been on Highway 6. Two of them have been backed up to residential neighborhoods that are no longer 24-hour operations, but they were at one point, different points. I hope it's not the case. I hope it doesn't detract at all from the neighborhood there, because I'm close to that neighborhood. But if a service station does, I have similar feelings to what Keir's mentioned and the mayor. I don't see it negatively affecting the neighborhood next to it. So that's my thoughts on that.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Let's go back to ordinance 25-19. We'll I'd entertain a motion on that one.
So I do have one comment before you do. Sorry. On the parking part of it, Dave.
Yep. You're back on the other one.
Yeah.
Okay. Not this one. Okay.
On the 25-19, sorry. So on that parking, so that R4, now we've increased the density to 20, okay? But then we decreased the parking with this ordinance and allowing the shared parking. I have a real problem with the shared parking. Development, we've got those office spaces or whatever ends up being built out on Spanish Fort Express or Parkway. They will have parking requirements to meet our building regulations, and we'll have that residential development behind them. R4 and that many housing needs to have enough parking for itself. That's just my opinion about that. That shared parking, probably in a doctor's office, is closed most of the evenings and stuff like that, so there would be a parking available, but I still think we have some issues in town already where these developments and businesses are already using our public streets and some public parking for permanent. I don't want that to become a thing in the city. There's other cities in this state that have huge parking problems and even living off their parking, and I don't want Spanish Fort to get to that point. And if we start sharing that, eventually I think they need to, that needs to be its own development. I don't care if they share after that, but I think the development needs, especially if we up that. So it used to be 17, now you're moving it to 20 more per unit, or per acre, sorry. So anyway, just my current concerns on that are on R4 with that sharing parking with the neighboring whatever parking lots. So
would you like to talk more about the R4 stuff right now?
And I know that's
I apologize.
concern
I think
for
we
Ridge
made
Line.
this
We have.
About as complicated as we possibly could have.
2 weeks in a row.
Right? Yeah, well, Merry Christmas. We continue to deliver. But the R4 changes, I think it will help when we're looking at, again, that next item on the agenda, maybe to go through that in a more detailed way.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you.
All right, I would entertain a motion on ordinance 25-19.
That would be need to waive. That has the R4 in it.
So we
Okay.
could,
Next,
So you can do it on Z1419. That's the one that's
That's the first one we talked about, 25-19.
That's got the R4 in it.
Right. And your point being?
wants us to go to
The
Z4.
state wants you to wait till you talk
Oh, you
about
wanted me
it.
to go to the other one first? All right, be that way. You know,
But we've had the public hearing on that, so we could make a motion
we've had a
on
public
that.
hearing on both of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead, an ordinance.
I move to approve ordinance Z1419, changing the zoning designation and amending the official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for the River Run Townhomes zone change.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Scobes. This is a roll call vote. Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
No.
Okay, now you want us to go back to, or does he want to talk more about
I
that?
think he wants to go to
Go to C.
the next, the Z1519.
Okay,
Because that and A are together.
Yeah.
And A has the C1 and the R4.
I'll work off of this presentation, then we'll switch over for the applicant. The other presentation should be-
For original? Okay, so you,
Yeah, I'll start here. I got this.
okay, let me pull up. Where we at?
I can get there too.
Oh, alright.
But thanks for the head start. That helps. I don't think any of you are unaware of what we'll talk about here next. This has been in the works for quite some time. In fact, it was just a few years ago that you approved a couple of different things. 2 different designations for our general plan. One that was really intended to accommodate a lower density kind of development. The Vincent Ridge project, for example, is a good example of what that particular zoning designation accommodates and permits. Projects at about 2 units to the acre. And at the same point in time, you adopted a general plan designation that was intended to allow for more than the 12 units to the acre that previously had been the maximum allowed in this city. Shortly after that, there was a new zoning district adopted, the R4 zone. Then shortly after that, the R5 zone was adopted. That's the tool that was used to allow for the Reese apartments over on 4th North. So with that little bit of background, here we are. This is the first proposal that's come to the council to change the zoning to R4. The proposal involves property that is currently designated for high-density development. We've talked about this property previously relative to a zone change that was approved for the frontage of what at one point in time was kind of considered a larger project, the frontage on Spanish Fork Parkway. That zoning was changed sometime over a year ago to commercial 2. Preschool's been constructed there, and I anticipate that we'll likely see some professional office construction happen there here in 2020. So flanks that as frontage on State Road 51. This is one of just a few candidate properties that we have in the city that we've said are a good fit for the R4 zone. It's that way for a number of reasons. I appreciate that Seth pointed out, certainly one of them, close proximity to really, really significant transportation corridors. State Road 51, you have Spanish Fork Parkway. Certainly 2 of what I think will be the top maybe 5 or 6 travel routes through the community. As the community continues to grow. Excellent candidate, incidentally, and appreciated conversation that Commissioner Argal and I had about UTA and the likelihood that with the hospital and Canyon Creek and different things that are going on in this area, the fact that right now the one route that UTA does have coming into the community, it does use State Road 51. I think this area is a very, very real candidate to have some level of UTA service, and largely that would be driven by this kind of development. So for a lot of different reasons from a land use perspective, the concept is really easy for me from kind of an urban planning view to support. Most of the time that we've spent working with this applicant and some of their predecessors really hasn't had much to do with density and what makes sense in terms of the housing type or those sorts of things. They have been site-specific things. How should the project be designed from a number of different perspectives? Things like how much parking should be required, how many garages, amenities, look of buildings, all of those types of things, which frankly by and large are prescribed in considerable detail in the provisions that our R4 zone has. So that being said, one of the things that makes our R4 zone unique and different from what a lot of other communities would permit in this kind of development, and here we're talking about, I would simply say it's a contemporary apartment complex. That's really what it is, with the types of amenities that you'd expect to see in a development of this type, type of building mass and bulk that you'd expect to see in a project of this type. Really nothing in some respects that's all that atypical, but the fact that it's not a set of buildings that is surrounded by a parking lot. You might recall that once upon a time a developer proposed to buy this property and gave us some examples of projects that they've done in some other communities. I think some were in Utah, some were in another state. They actually had a layout that showed how they would propose to develop this property, and in short, it involved a sea of parking, which is what would have been visible from Spanish Fork Parkway and State Road 51, with some buildings on the interior. And the model that our Planning Commission came to after working for a really long time, it was a couple of years that they spent coming up with the elements that now comprise our R4 zone. It's different. It, simply put, the best example, we think, of the right way to do this kind of density really is found in Springville, to where on the north end of Spanish Forks Main Street, there's a project that has residential buildings directly fronting onto public streets. So not private streets, not parking lots, not those types of things. Tree-lined streets, people that, from balconies and different things, direct access to that public realm, different things that I really believe will make that age over time as a neighborhood and not a compound. Now, you've heard that before, you didn't need to hear it tonight, but I mention it because this applicant has designed this project to meet that most important to me criteria for this kind of development. And I don't think it's necessarily been easy for them to do. I do think over time it will be to their benefit. And that being said, touch on a couple of other things relative to it. Maybe I should point out a couple of things here first. Again, State Road 51 here. We anticipate, perhaps a convenience store here, something like that, perhaps some kind of a retail outlet, professional office buildings here. You might have noticed the preschool. It's located right here. But the travel routes through the project would be public streets. Those would be lined with buildings. So you'd have park strip trees, landscaping building throughout those routes, parking on the interior or behind buildings. Each of the buildings do have attached garages, clubhouse, swimming pool, different things like that. Out on the State Road 51 frontage, more amenities over here and elsewhere in the project, from playgrounds and so forth. I'll let the applicant speak to in more detail relative to exactly what they're proposing to do. And That being said, again, the effort that was put into developing the R4 zone, I think at this point pays off. I absolutely believe that. Yet, our most clear crystal ball that we had when the specific provisions and numbers were being considered, when the proposal to adopt the R4 zone was made, was only so perfect. So that being the case, we found over the course of, this is me by the way, sorry, I'm going back to the R4 zone, another topic, the specific provisions. We found, as we've worked with the applicant to get to this particular design, that, and I'll just speak for myself, that I think it makes sense to make some adjustments to some aspects of this. And I think there are really three main ones that jump out. First of all, the density. Right now, the R4 zone limits density to 18 units to the acre. That's a great number to use. I really think it is. We came to that in something of an arbitrary fashion a few years ago. This applicant would like this project to exceed 18 units to the acre. Depending on exactly how we measure it, because there are some sensitive lands here in the project, they're either just over 18 units to the acre or they're just over 19. So the proposal to accommodate this particular design would take that density ceiling from 18 units to the acre up to 20. Now, we hate to be wrong on our first project, or ask for that change to be made right out of the chute. And I'm lobbying here a little bit, but from my perspective, boy, if we were off by 1 unit per acre, back 3 years ago, we were pretty darn close. Another issue, and I would call this significant. So this is the particular language, making that change there, 18 to 20. Another change involves how many garages have to be provided. With, for example, the R5 zone, we require 1 garage for every 2 units in the project. So that's what the Reese project has. 50%, we could say, of the units would have access to a garage. The model that we used for the R4 zone, this project in Springville, again, 80% of the units there have access to a garage. That's where we got this number from. Not entirely arbitrary, but we didn't have a particular design in front of us to critique and to use to create the measuring stick that the R4 zone is. I think the Planning Commission, and certainly I feel like garages, as we looked at projects throughout the valley, and tried to decide which ones, for example, aged particularly well over time, which ones seemed to maybe hold tenants longer and have less turnover and things like that. That really seemed to be part of the program. Developments that have garages, particularly attached garages. We think, speak now for the Planning Commission, that absolutely that should remain a requirement moving forward. But both staff and the Planning Commission have recommended that 80% threshold be dropped down to 60%. Just that's not saying that less parking be provided, but just that less parking has to be provided in garages. So that's density, garages, that's the other change. Building height, going from 45 feet to 50 feet as the maximum height. Again, I wish we were always that close. That's a relatively nominal change. And actually, Bruce Fallon, who's chairman of the Planning Commission when these provisions were written, he and I had a few conversations about that might be something we'd want to revisit. Him being an architect, I think he had some foresight there. So relative to things that would change what an applicant has to provide, those are the big ones now. Councilman Argyle, he's touched on this other language here, which, and I appreciate your description. I think it's spot on. The idea is that potentially, if some provisions are met, an applicant could utilize an adjacent development's parking with a cross-parking agreement, easement, different things like that in place to satisfy the minimum parking requirement that they have to meet. Up to 30% of the parking could be provided on an adjacent site. That's a fairly arbitrary number that we came up with. Happens to coincide fairly closely with what these applicants have proposed. I think the scenario, Councilman Argyle, that you outlined, I can't remember if it was just when we talked or if you brought it up tonight, to where the potential might exist to where it's a Saturday where people are home from work in the apartments and the professional office buildings next door are open for business and there's a need for parking there. I don't think it's entirely far-fetched at all that you could have an issue when that happens. At the same time, the relationship of allowing a residential use and a complementary use, might be retail, might be professional office like it would be in this case, which typically, maybe not always, and I appreciate that concern, but typically park highest at complementary hours, professional office uses, demand parking, whatever, right? 8 to 5, 7 to 6, something like that. The greatest need for parking in a residential setting is probably 6, 7, 8 o'clock to 6, 7 o'clock a.m. At least that's typically what we see. And generally speaking, that relationship works fairly well, if not really well. It's not to say it would always be perfect. That being said, no part of this proposal would allow for a project to be approved without having at least 2.5 off-street parking spaces provided. It's 2.5 units, or 2.5 spaces per home, per apartment unit. For good reason, that is a high number. You all, off the top of your heads, could point out examples of neighborhoods in Spanish Fork that don't have sufficient off-street parking. We can speculate about why that is. Just looking at the numbers, folks that develop properties in other communities, I would say they probably don't believe that with the parking that we've required in the past, there should be a problem. But our experience is different. Projects in Spanish Fork Park were they really high. But I do want to be clear about that with what's proposed tonight, that full 2.5 parking spaces of off-street parking is provided if this is permitted. Spaces in the adjacent development can count. That's a pretty long intro. I apologize for that. Again, the Planning Commission, Development Review Committee, they've recommended that it be approved. It's been in the works for a long time. I'll take any questions.
So 336 units, did they feel like the two, can we go back to the development of it? That the two X, obviously those roads are wider, but does the two X's, is that adequate for the 300 units in and out?
Yes, and there probably will be more than that in different fashions.
Oh, okay.
But by way of public routes, you could look at it this way. This is a pretty good sized subdivision. You have 336 homes. I am a big fan of access. I'd say you can't have too much ever, but having direct access onto State Road 51, what really will be direct access onto Spanish Fork Parkway as well. I can't imagine that there will be, for example, a lot of really significant stacking and things like that.
That's a pickleball court, right?
I'll let the applicant walk through exactly what they're proposing that way.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate your time.
Does the developer want to come and talk a little?
But he's chomping at the bit.
I bet he is. You know.
Happy to.
Because every time I've been with you, you've wanted to talk.
I'm a
So
talker, Mayor.
come on up.
I can shoot the breeze with you.
You got your 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes? Oh, shoot.
And you state your name.
Yeah. Joseph Ernest. Address is 2419 East Purple Sage Drive. Actually, I just live up the hill on this in Fieldstone Homes.
Is this the one you want?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Am I driving with this?
Yeah. Yep. You got it.
Point over to that way.
Yeah. So first and foremost, got to thank the staff. This is a long time in the making. Dave and Brandon have worked with us many times, many iterations of the site plan. I am intimately familiar with the R4 code, probably more than I want to be, but I can speak to a lot of how this is really, we were trying to stick a round peg into a square hole, so I'll speak to that a little bit. But going through, I'm going to jump right into the site plan and kind of walk you through this. So each building has 44 units, except for this shorter building has 28 units. And each building has 12 in-building garages. That becomes important because even if you're requiring more than 60% and you're not for the text amendment, the only way we can accommodate it is to add more garages on the exterior. So I would make the case that it's not going to be that helpful. I'd also make the case that from our experience, even at Outlook, so we've been talking about the Outlook apartment units in Springville as kind of like the baseline, that's the bar we're trying to meet. I would submit to you that there's probably a significant number of their garages that are storage units. And especially in this development, I just want to break down the ratio of the number of beds in the 336 so you can be more familiar with that. So the 3-bed, 2 baths will be 56 units. There'll be 2-bed, 2 baths will be 168 units. The 1-bed, 1 bath will be 112. So that plays into the number of garages that are likely necessary. So walking you through, we're very proud of the number of amenities that we're providing. Your code states that we need to provide 8. We're providing 13. So the idea here for us is that we're coming to you with a the highest end residential dwelling unit project. Yeah, you good with that? We're coming to you with the highest end residential dwelling unit project type for this housing type that we can possibly come to you with. So the number of amenities, the site layout, the elevations, which you'll see here, it's all high end. In fact, it's patterned after the developer owns units, owns the apartment units at Traverse Mountain, which we're using the same elevations. And the same 3-bed, 2-bath rents for between $1,900 and $2,100 a month. So ours will be less than that, but it'll be comparable, right? So we're looking at $1,600 to $1,800 for a 3-bed, and then it'll go down from there. 2-bed, 2-bath will be $1,200 to $1,400, and then the 1-bed will, we think, $900 to $1,000 is what we're projecting today. So it gives you an idea of what's going to be coming in. Also, because it's essentially the first one of its kind in the city of Spanish Fork, and I submit to you the best place for it. If it doesn't fit here, it just doesn't fit. But because it's the first one, any other developer would be competing in the rental market, right? So we're setting a standard, a very high-end standard in the city of Spanish Fork, which is important to me. I live here. That any other future development would have to meet the same or higher standards that we're going to meet here in this project to compete for the renters, compete for the market share. So we think we're going to do great. Some of the items we've done is this is going to be a 3-foot berm of landscaping here, no fencing. Again, going along with the open feel. We have a wrought iron fence that will wrap around the pool, wrap around the clubhouse, and then even wrap all the way back here around the pavilion and barbecue. And this is more for safety, keep those who are using this off of State Road 51, but also keep it visible, that open feel. Our civil engineer had the darndest time getting all the buildings on the public right away while providing the necessary parking and the necessary amenities. So it's kind of a little bit of a work of art in a sense. Walking you through the parking, because this is really important. So Outlook Apartments, Councilmember Argyle, the city required them to meet 2 parking spaces per unit, 2. So we're at 2.5. And the city also allows at Outlook the residents to park on the road. you would allow the residents to park on this road as well, but we're at 2.5, not counting off-street parking. We would, with red curbing the turning radiuses throughout this development, we'd still have another 122 parking spaces on the road, which would put us at 2.86 parking spaces per unit. It's a Herculean amount of parking that we've been able to get on this site. I submit to you that parking will not be an issue. In fact, 2.5 is higher than surrounding cities as well. You're probably familiar. The 2.5 per unit is actually high. So we're even beating that. Outlook being the benchmark for parking as well, because there are residents that we know that live at Outlook that say that the on-street parking at Outlook is rarely to capacity. It's almost always empty, the on-street parking. And they're only, again, 2 parking spaces per unit. So we're far above that. So hopefully that solves your concerns for parking. Moving along here, because you've seen things like this, I'll be a little bit brief here as I go. I don't think there's an argument about whether or not this fits in the zoning, so I'm just going to jump forward. This is appropriate per the general plan. You can see it's a mixed use designation, and it's the adjacent uses per your general plan. That's the on-street parking exhibit. We're not counting it, but from a pragmatic, practical sense, there will be people parking on street, and we are going to red curb all of the turning radiuses so that they don't park for safety issues. We don't want that to happen. Here's our phasing plan, our plat. I think I'm pointing in the right spot. There we go. And then here are our elevations. We think they're beautiful. We think they will set a standard for the city. Here they are actually in reality, going back. That's the 4-story elevation. All of our buildings, again, are 4 stories. They're beautiful. They'll vary in colors, yet to be determined, but they'll be beautiful stone, brick, various aesthetic materials, and then you can see the roof lines as well, how they're varied. Again, they'll be aesthetically pleasing. There you go. There you see the 12 garages in the building, the end caps. Scrolling through here, floor plans. Our floor plans meet the R4 code, actually exceed it. There's a minimum number of square footage depending on the number of bedrooms in the R4 code. We exceed the minimum square footage necessary on each of the bedroom types. Here are garages. A real life example there of what they'll look like. And then we are going to have many wonderful amenities. There's a BYU logo here. That's likely to be the case on our basketball court. Got a thumbs up? A couple thumbs up? We can't. Ask the lawyer. This, awesome.
He's all in.
He's in. I like it. So we're going to have many amenities. They're not necessarily going to look exactly like this, but they'll. Here's our clubhouse, elevations, pool. I'll scroll through these quickly. Again, the idea is to provide all the creature comforts that anyone would want, one-stop shop for awesomeness. I think that's a thing. Soccer field. I'm going to the last 2 slides because there is an important part of this, especially with what Councilmember Argyle said. So in our site plan, you're going to see 6 walkways from the commercial strip to the north, where we have that recorded parking easement, and for the 240 parking spaces. And the 6 walkways will be all like this, will be very pedestrian friendly. And again, the property abuts ours completely, and they'll all be well lit. So it's just going to be, I think it's going to be a cohesive project. Even the parking to the north that our residents will enjoy from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then 24 hours a day, Saturday and Sunday. They will enjoy this. And again, we're going to do a see-through fence. Again, to keep it one cohesive whole, avoid the compound effect. I think it's just going to be a fantastic overall project. And speaking to, again, what Dave said, because it's going to most likely be office They're not going to be they're not going to be there on Saturday. They're not going to be there on Sunday. So the parking should actually be a yin and yang. It should be a great relationship between the two projects.
Can I ask you real quick on that?
Yeah.
With an easement recorded, who someone complains about parking that way or something, one of the residents or one of the businesses, vice versa, who remedies that? Do we send the police chief out with a gun, or what do we do?
Well, it's going to be operated by us.
Okay.
So our property management company will have to take care of that. Please don't send the police chief out with a gun.
Thank you.
He only has one bullet. That's all we allow.
Don't tell all the secrets.
So I'm available to answer questions, but appreciate the consideration.
Great. We might have some after this public hearing, so we'll go from there. All right, I'd entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Beck, second by Councilman Scopes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone that'd like to come and talk about this project, you're sure welcome to come up. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any questions, comments, editorials?
So where the basketball court is, I know when we talked about this, some of that ground was, not wilderness, what am I thinking? Wetlands. Is that what some of this ground is that was part of that?
Yeah, in fact, we have an updated biologist report, and the updated biologist report is incorporated into the site plan. So if you go to the site plan,
Yeah, here, let me pull this back up.
you'll see the delineation here. So here we go. So this is wetland area. It'll be natural landscaping, and then it'll be manicured landscaping all around it. In fact, 36% of the project is landscaping, which is pretty significant for this type of project.
Thank you.
Might have a job.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you talk about red curbs on the approach areas, about how far would that take? Right here by your pool, my thought and concern is when my kid gets invited to a birthday party, because this is our neck of the woods, we're going to park there on Highway 51 because this is quick. Is this going to be red?
Parking for you at the pool.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
specific for the clubhouse and the pool.
How far would that? I mean, this is going to be red lined though, right? Red curb is what you're saying.
And it'll be fenced.
And fenced.
And fenced with a rock.
So even to get around.
Yeah,
those
no one's going
visitors
through there.
coming.
Correct.
Okay.
That's a good point.
You'd want
and we
to
agree.
come over.
Okay, and I don't really see a lot of parking up here because if I park on the road and then I walk to my apartment at night.
You're going to park right here.
Yeah.
Council members. As this commercial strip develops, we have parking rights within the commercial strip. So that's where you'd park and you'd walk right. So if you look over, so there's a walkway right here, a walkway right here, there's a walkway right there, right there. There's another one right there, and there's even another one I missed, but there's 6 that will be lit and actual striped parking.
Gotcha.
So it's just connected.
And when phases? I didn't hear you mention like how we phased
I want
things.
you to go there, I'm just going to show you. Ready?
Okay.
Phase 1, right through here, and up here and around. And then phase 1 is also the entire public road.
And includes the clubhouse
And
and
it
pool.
includes the clubhouse and the pool.
Okay.
And this playground and this pavilion.
Okay.
Phase 2, these 2 buildings and this pavilion.
Okay.
Phase 3 is the rest, pavilion, playground, massive pavilion barbecue, massive playground, splash pad, basketball, pickleball court, and then a big soccer field right here. And then again, this whole section will be manicured.
Every night. My daughter is 19 and approaching. Her boyfriend hasn't asked me for permission yet.
He better.
But it's coming.
Okay.
We talked wedding before we jumped it, but every night seems to be a conversation of how are we going to be able to live in Spanish Fork, and so.
Cool. Good.
This is
So
a
we have a
welcome
basement for it.
welcome idea. I know we talk a lot about densities and projects, and I feel like of areas in Spanish Fork, this is probably a great area for it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Any other questions or comments? All right. So which one do you want us to do first?
1925.
You want me to do 2519 first? Okay. All right, now I'd entertain entertain a motion for ordinance 25-19.
So keep in mind, that includes your C1, your R4, your two definitions.
Yes, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2519, making amendments to the land use ordinance, making text amendments to the residential 4 and commercial 1 zones, and adding definitions.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argal. This also will be a roll call vote. Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
All right. Now, ordinance Z15-19.
I move that we approve ordinance Z 15-19, changing the zoning designation and amending the official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for Ridgeline Parkway Community Zone change.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilmember Beck, a second by Councilman Scobes. This also will be a roll call vote. Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Passed.
Get it built.
Yeah. Nice job, Joe. Appreciate it, even though what Dal said about you.
He's going to have to wait to get his daughter married till you get it done.
Yeah.
Hey, you like going to city council meetings all the time, huh?
No, I'll leave now.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. All right, 2020 budget, FY.
Fast and
My
Furious.
favorite deal. Sorry for you to have to wait so long.
This is, we still have the audit to do too.
I
so
know,
I'll go
that's why I was apologizing.
He wasn't apologizing to you, Ken.
I wasn't looking at
He was
you.
apologizing to Russ.
Just
All
to
right.
be polite.
I'll talk fast as long as he promises to talk faster.
Oh, he will.
All right, this is revision number 2. Our budget, current budget is $115 million. With the end of the year and some projects that are being completed, it's needed to amend our budget and increase it $2 million. And I'll zoom in on a couple of what has caused those funds or projects. It is an increase. There's 3 different parts of the pie. There's a general fund, enterprise funds, and miscellaneous funds. You can get an image of what that looks like. The enterprise funds are the utility funds that we have in the city. General fund are usually those that are run by taxes. And then miscellaneous funds are not changing in this revision. So the arrow there picks out the enterprise fund. Of the $2 million that's changing, 2.1 of it is in the enterprise funds. Inside those enterprise funds, one storm drainage fund is the main one that has projects that were increasing this budget change. You can see a small decrease in the sewer collection and a small increases in the sewer plant and the electric, but the storm drain is the big one. There's just projects specifically in projects of $2,050,000 just in that. And so this kind of highlights of all the storm and street drainage. There's a couple other things that are being adjusted, but it's mainly in this capital projects for some major projects. And if you want discussion on those, you can ask Chris where those are at. It's mostly around Lowe's and some of the improvements on Caney Road. This is some changes in the general fund, just like ones in the airport. I'll talk about in a minute. The ambulance, parks, and cemetery. So it only increases up $84,000 in the general fund departments. This is a discussion. It's a public hearing for a donation. A couple council meetings ago, might have been the last one, there was a donation request to the Gail Halverson Foundation. This is allowing that check to be written. If the council approves this donation list from a public hearing, it will add Gail Halverson's donation. Remember, it was the donation that from the airplanes, trains, and automobiles event. Some of the profits from that was donated to AirTag for the Gail Halverson Museum and Learning Center at the airport. And this will allow that donation to be a check written.
check's not gonna bounce, is it, Kent, that big one?
It was a pretend check.
Couldn't get it through the
Media check.
tube.
So that'll be one item that you're approving with the budget. Another item we needed to have a public hearing for is a loan from the electric department to the parks, All Abilities Park that is being built. There's a need to purchase some property. The money that was donated was not to be used to buy property, so the city was to buy the property, and it's needed to loan the money from the electric department to the All Abilities Park for the amount of $2 million, and for that to be paid back from funds of the park will not charge that much money to earn money to pay it back, but through payments each year will be budgeted payments back to the electric department. It could be from the RAP tax, it could be from sales tax, it could be from other things that but we're committed to pay the money back to the electric department for the fronting this money that we could purchase the land, because the city was in need of buying the land so they construct the park. So this next part of the public hearing will be discussing a resolution authorizing the electric department to loan the city ourselves $2 million and to pay it back. And this is the amortization schedule. In order to get the funds flow to pay it back, it's for the amount of the loan is for $2 million. Term is 10 years. The rate is 2.5, which is what we get at the state pool. While our money is with earning money at the state pool, we're going to pay ourselves back that same interest. We're going to defer the interest, or you could decide to pay just interest only until we can receive the funds, and then we'll make these 7 annual payments afterwards, which would reduce the loan, the original loan, plus adding the capital as interest, and then coming back to a zero balance in the year 2029. So there is a resolution that's Junior drafted that goes through these terms, allowing the city to loan ourselves money from another entity fund. Okay? And the next part, I think Tyler's going to talk about the elected and appointed officials' compensation. There's required for us to have a public hearing as that portion of a budget would be changed and discussed. And so
Will you go back? Will you go back?
Oh, you want me to go back to
Yeah, go back to the loan one. I think one thing that we've talked about with this one is the loan value. One parcel of property is just under $1.9 million, and there's a second parcel that we can acquire that would be about 200. And so I think it'd be wise to have the loan amount be 2.1, not where he's got it highlighted in yellow, but up above that loan amount, having that be 2.1 instead of a 2 flat. We can keep all the land in that category, and Kent can adjust the payments according to what that tweak does. We can still pay it back in the same terms. It would slightly increase
this number to 2.1.
Right. Yeah, and it would slightly increase that repayment of $339 to, let's say it's $365 or $8. I don't know what the number is, but I think that would be my recommendation. The resolution is put together, but it has the placeholder of the dollar amount. We can make that change in the resolution. But that'd be my recommendation.
With that, Kent, we're regulated by the state to the percentage that we can have in cash reserves. Is that considered cash reserves once we loan it to ourselves?
It'll be spent.
It's restricted.
It's
re-spent, so it won't be in cash.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. It'll disappear.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And opening that 2.1 encompasses all the land we need to purchase.
Yeah, I guess those 2 parcels.
So one big land purchase.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's covered the last.
Yeah. So in November,
we had a council meeting work session where we talked a little bit about the compensation study that we conducted for elected officials. Every 2 years, so the public understands how we do this, every 2 years we evaluate where the elected officials' salaries are, and we do that based on a similar philosophy that we use with our benefited employees. So we go out and we compare the mayor's salary and the city council members' salaries with our cities that are comparable to us. You'll notice what I have up on the screen right now are the comparables for the mayors. There's 11, excuse me, 11 comp cities that we compare to. You'll notice with the council there's actually 15. The reason for that is the form of government that some of these comp cities have. Some of them have a full-time mayor, so their form of government is different than ours. So we don't compare to them. So after we ran the numbers this year, what we do is we take the average of our comp cities, and then we take that to the 60th percentile. And you'll notice with the position of the mayor, they're highlighted in yellow. It would take the annual salary to $27,928, which is right there on the rank. You'll see as far as the cities that we compare to is number 5 in that area. And then the council, like I mentioned before, we compare to 15 other cities, and as we take the 60th percentile of those comp cities, the number comes out to be $17,467 on that. Any questions?
Or 7th, right?
Yes.
So the 7th with
7 out of 15 other, well, I guess out of 16, because if you count ourselves, then yeah.
We also discussed in November, the cities, looks like you've put up their vehicles and phone stipends.
Yeah.
And calculated that in there. But we also discussed what it would be if we looked at the 80th percentile for mayor.
So after having some discussions, one of the things that we talked about was trying to stay consistent with our current salary study and the way that we do that. And in order to stay consistent with that, we did not take the 80th percentile. But what we did do is include, rather than just the annual, this isn't working, sorry. Rather than just taking the annual salary, we also accounted for any additions like phone and vehicle stipends and just added that into that number. So you'll notice that it would have been about almost 16,000, but because we took into account the other stipends that were being given, it bumped that number up by a couple $1,000s there. Does that answer your question? I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
More than happy to take a look at other options if you'd like. We can still do that.
I think the discussion as we had it in November was, that we operate a city better as far as, especially the mayor. We were really going to bat, and so that was the argument. But I see what you're saying about consistency.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the 3 pillars of our compensation system right now are the consistency, the equity, and also sustainability, whether we can sustain this same type of philosophy moving forward or whether we need to change the way that we do things. Any other questions?
Thanks, Tyler, for your
Thank you for the work.
Thanks for doing
Thank you.
that.
One more slide, it gives you the total one more time so you can. So a couple of motions. One is to approve the amended budget, and that's the total of the budget. And the other would be adopt the resolution by resolution number and changing the loan amount as far as the term in that to 2.1, and then the related.
That resolution is on other business.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But we need to go on a public hearing first, correct?
It's just part of this.
You have a public hearing, but the motion doesn't need to necessarily be part of the budget.
Wait and do that resolution.
All right. Since this is a public hearing, I'd entertain a motion for.
So moved.
A motion by Councilman Argal,
Second.
second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone that'd like to come talk about the budget, your favorite thing, you're welcome. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to go out of.
So moved.
A motion by Councilman Argal.
Second. Oh.
Can you do both? Second. I don't know if Junior will let you do that.
Sorry.
Councilman Mendenhall, be seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any other questions, comments? If seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve fiscal year 2020 budget revision number 2 as presented by Kent and Tyler.
Second?
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilmember Beck. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. New business, finally. FY 2019 Independent Audit Financial Audit.
Ladies and gentlemen, the entertainment has arrived. I'm just kidding.
It's about time.
Okay, so I believe that if you've been here before, you're kind of used to the routine. I'll be brief. I don't know if you've all received an electronic copy of what I have in front of me. I'm sure if you have, you've read all 88 pages of it.
Yep.
With your highlighter and a journal to keep notes in.
You got your phone number, so tonight at 3 o'clock, after I finish reading, I can call you.
Absolutely.
That's what I thought.
So what I'm really going to do, there's a lot of information in there. I'm just going to go over our reports really quick, knowing that if you have questions, Kent and his staff can help, and I can certainly help. But for interest of time in this setting, I will just go over our reports. With that, then, in that bound copy that you just received, on page 1 is our audit report. We talk in our audit report about basically that we've audited the financial statements of your fiscal year, the last fiscal year, that's ending June 30th of 2019. The financial statements are the responsibility of city's management, and our responsibility is to give an opinion. And our opinion is that in all material respects, these financial statements are correct. Translated, that means that that's a clean opinion on the financial statements. On page 2, it makes reference to some additional information in the back behind the financial statements and refers to the government auditing standards report that I'll actually cover in just a second. So that's our audit report on the financial statements. What follows that is management's discussion and analysis, which is some kind of a summary of financial information of the city, but it's probably written more in English than any of the rest of the financial statements, which are written in whatever language accountants speak, which isn't always necessarily English. So there's that, the financial statements themselves, the notes to the financial statements, which is going to skip you all the way over to page 75. This is our government auditing standards report, and this is simply information on the fact that when we do government audits, we are required to look at your internal controls and your compliance with certain laws and regulations, the violation of which could result in a material misstatement on your financial statements. The purpose being not to give an opinion on either your internal controls or your compliance, but for us to determine what procedures we're going to do to come to our conclusion that I already mentioned. So we use that information to decide the procedures that we go through, how deep we dig to come to our opinion. And so that's just information, there's no opinion provided in that report. The next report on page 77 is our state compliance report. The state of Utah requires, when we do an audit, to look specifically at those things listed there about 1/3 of the way down the page. So we look at your budget, for example, and compliance with fund balance requirements and so on as they're listed there. And there is an opinion in this report, and our opinion is that in all material respects that the city followed those requirements. And so there's no findings that need to be reported here. There are a couple of things that we'll talk about that we refer to as immaterial instances of non-compliance in the management letter, but nothing that needed to be reported right there. And then the rest of the report is, we call it a single audit, but basically what it is when you get federal funds in excess of a certain amount, we come and have to do some test work specifically on those funds to make sure that they were used the way they were supposed to. And I believe the money that came in this year was some money that you used for trails or something. So the next report basically is the conclusion that we came to on that, and that is, again, in all material respects, the city complied with the compliance requirements of that grant, of those grants. That is all I have to say about the part that you have that's bound. There's a stapled few pages in the back that is the management letter, or in accountant language, it's the communication to those charged with governance. Much more clear, right?
There's mud.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where we have an opportunity to express any ideas we have or observations we have of areas for improvement. And officially, this letter is our opportunity as auditors to communicate any issues or problems that we had with staff. Now, had that been the case, we would have already been in contact with each other, but that wasn't the case. But if it were, this is the official mechanism that we use to communicate that with you. So that's the first couple of pages of the letter, and then there's the findings listed on the last page. We did have a couple of things that we'll talk about this year, and they all have to do with state compliance. And so the first thing there is that the garbage fund, actually the expenditures exceeded the budget, the appropriated budget, and this actually happens not infrequently, because at the end of the year you go in and you make some budget adjustments, and inevitably there's something that you forgot about or shows up. And anyway, so it's a state compliance issue. It's not a big concern for us as auditors, where it's not there's nothing bad going on. It was just an oversight, but it is required to be reported as a finding in this to you as the management of the city. So our recommendation is to just stay within budget. The next one is a few years ago, the state auditors implemented a website, or started a website, where all of the cities and local governments, once their minutes of their meetings were approved, they needed to post them to this specific website. Now, and they're required to be posted within like 3 business days of being approved. And I'll tell you that of all the cities that we audit, Spanish Fork has always been ahead of the curve in putting information like that on their own website to make it available. Like the city's done that for as long as I can remember, and they've always been good at it. But this new requirement is just, well, that's fine if you put it on your website, but you have to put it on this other website. And so that just got overlooked on a couple of the sets of meetings. And again, it's not something that we're terribly stressed about. It's just, it's a state compliance issue, and so we report it here and as a reminder. And Angie already knows about it. And she's already thanked me for bringing it to her attention. So
I bet she did.
So that's what I've got. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got one.
Okay.
Is Kent going to jail?
No. Not for anything that I'm aware of.
How about the chair of the garbage district?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Hey, we sure appreciate
I haven't
you.
audited the chair of the
Okay,
garbage
well,
district.
that's
Probably something to look into.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your time and doing that.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
coming.
Thank you. I appreciate the city staff. They put up with this. I recognize that we're auditors, and while we are fun-loving and bubbly, we are auditors. So I appreciate them putting up with us and giving us what we need, and I appreciate them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So in the city's response, my rebuttal, I guess.
There was no quick rebuttal witness.
Chair, could I
Yeah, go ahead.
suspend, right? We were over budget. It came about mainly because some of our vendors' bills came early, and so we got billed for 13 months instead of 12 months. And we didn't know that until the very end of the year, as after too late to amend the budget. And so we actually have a vendor, like the transfer station, this year we paid 13 months. So next year we may only pay 11 months, and so we'll be way under budget next year. See how those months line up. So.
That's a good rebuttal.
Just trying to save you some
So
money.
anyway, it's not that, it is something, so we'll do better at trying to match it up, but we'll put 12 months in the 12-month cycle instead of 13 months in the 12.
We need a motion to approve it. I make a motion, we approve the 2019 independent financial audit.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Resolution 19-21, approving a loan from the electric fund to all the bills depart.
Already discussed in the
Already
budget.
discussed.
I move we approve Resolution 1921, approving a loan from the electric fund to the All Abilities Park Project Fund with the noted change by Seth to increase that to that even number to tie up both the properties.
Second.
2.1, was that it? 2.1.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Scobes. Roll call vote. Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Passes. Resolution 19-22, amending Smashburg employee personnel policy concerning uniform.
This is about as straightforward as it gets. That's louder than the other mic, isn't it? Wow. The only changes that we're proposing are those shown here in red. It's just the location of where our style guide is, so that Mayor can always look slick and stylish in his Spanish Fort gear. So really, there's not. This is it. What you see is what the changes are.
Way to go. I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve Resolution 19-22, amending the Spanish Fork City Employee Personnel Policy concerning uniforms.
Got a motion by Councilmember Beck.
Second.
Second by Councilman Argal. Roll call vote. Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Ordinance 26-19, amending the Smashburg Municipal Code concerning continuous parking requirements.
No, I do not.
That was a quick no.
That was too quick, wasn't it?
That was.
So the police department recently were reprinting some notices concerning parking and realized that the state law had changed, that vehicles can be left unattended on a street for only 48 hours to the previous 72. So we don't need to match them in our code, but we thought it would be good to do that. So this is an amendment to our code, changing the unattended parked vehicle from 72 hours to 48 hours before we can cite it or tow it if we need to.
Enough.
Motion to approve ordinance number 26-19, an ordinance amending the Spanish Fork Municipal Code concerning continuous parking requirements.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. Roll call vote. Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scholes.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
City-owned property sale purchase agreement with Evergreen.
We accepted an offer from Evergreen Devco on the parcel of property that the city had for sale up on Spanish Fork Parkway and Highway 6. The asking price that we had was $860,000, and that's what they offered us. And they now are in their due diligence period, so it could be a little bit of time before we finalize everything, but this money has been budgeted to help fund Fire Station 62. And as a reminder, this was originally the site that that fire station was going to be built on, and then we later decided it would fit better on Canyon Road and Spanish Fork Parkway right there. So,
What's Seth going to do with the extra money?
Fire Station 62. There's no
it's yeah.
We need a motion on this?
Yeah, I think we need to.
I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Evergreen Devco agreement, allowing the mayor or the pertinent person with authority to sign that contract on behalf of the city.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mapleton ULS water connection. Mr. Waterman. I know it.
Side of town. Okay, and then just zoom out a little bit. So, the ULS pipeline, maybe we need to see down in this area. Okay, so the ULS pipeline is a pipeline that comes from Strawberry Reservoir all the way down the canyon. Here near the mouth of the canyon, it splits off. One pipeline goes north and the other one south. The one that goes north is actually connected to a new large concrete reservoir up here in Mapleton, and then kind of from the same area, you have what's called the Spanish Fork Reach, which comes kind of through this gravel pit and then down this road over by our golf course and then up, and is now kind of headed down through Salem. We have a connection to this ULS pipeline right here, which has high enough pressures that we can gravity feed our reservoir from Strawberry Reservoir, which is really nice. It saves a lot of pumping costs. One thing when they were building the Spanish Fork Reach that we had asked for is a connection to this reservoir here that would feed the northeast bench of Spanish Fork. As the northeast bench of Spanish Fork has grown significantly, the pressures have dropped in that area because of limited feeds into the area. So we've known we've needed another transmission or trunk line into this area, and what we felt like would be good is to just get another feed from this reservoir into this area, and that would significantly help all the pressures in that area. So we were excited about that. The Department of the Interior and the Bureau was really hesitant to do this because they worried it might violate their environmental document. for running the Smashwork Reach. And so we backed off that request since we're basically being told it couldn't happen then. But we are hopeful now that this project's done and we have now begun taking this ULS water into our reservoir and now have more of a working relationship with the Department of the Interior and Central Utah and getting this water to come to us, that we could make that request again. The alternative to doing this is running a new trunk line almost parallel to that trunk line, the ULS line, all the way through the golf course, up Powerhouse Road, underneath US 6, under the railroad, and then come up and then run it into the town from our reservoir, which works. But ironically, we've both modeled this in house, and then we went to Hanson and Luce and modeled it with them as well. Ironically, even though that costs us millions of dollars more, it actually is less beneficial to our system than if we just did a simple connection here to our water system. So we've outlined that. We've kind of given these results to Central Utah, and the suggestion was made that if perhaps a letter from the mayor could come from Smashwork City requesting this to the Department of Interior, Central Utah, then maybe we could get maybe a little bit more momentum in getting this approved. So what we're asking is that you authorize the mayor to make this official request, and we type up the letter and send it to the mayor to sign and then turn it in.
Would it be more powerful if it came from all six? And just if one is good, or six better?
Well, you gotta consider the six.
How about Will sign it and leave his name off?
I'll ask that. My gut feeling is it's fine just with the mayor, but I'll ask that, and if so, maybe you could authorize me to. If they say yes, then I would just have all of you sign it too.
If we can get this is a significant improvement for every reason that Chris outlined. It has seemed really frustrating to replicate that water going back.
So
This is
Right in the same, right up the same, next to the same pipe that's there.
Right.
We think we're really optimistic, but we don't want to take any chances. We want to really push this through.
All right, I entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Mapleton ULS water connection authorization letter from the mayor and or any other necessary officials.
A motion by Councilman Scobes.
Second.
Second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor?
Aye.
Take it.
I move we go into closed session for reasonably imminent litigation and land transaction.
A motion by Councilman
Second.
Gordon, a second by Councilman Scobes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
If you don't want your book, I'll take it out.